A millionaire found an abandoned boy with a mysterious note at his door. What he discovered left him in tears. Thunder crackled across the Manhattan skyline as David Lawrence stood frozen at his mansion's garden door. Through the torrential rain, his security lights illuminated an unconscious small figure curled beneath his prized oak tree. Next to the boy lay a weathered box, its contents partially scattered across the wet grass. Among them a rain-soaked letter and something that made David's heart stop, a faded photograph of himself from 10 years ago, one he'd given to Sarah Mitchell the night she disappeared from his life. The boy's face, even in unconsciousness, bore an unmistakable resemblance that shook David to his core. Have you ever watched a life-changing moment unfold? Before we dive into this touching story, take a moment to share where you're watching from and hit subscribe. Your presence makes our storytelling community stronger. At 45, David Lawrence had everything money could buy, yet his 15,000 square foot Upper East Side mansion echoed with emptiness. Forbes listed him among New York's most eligible bachelors, but the dating scene had long lost its appeal. His nights were spent in his home office, overlooking Central Park, building his empire while fighting memories he'd rather forget. 10 years ago, he was a different man. Rising through Wall Street's ranks, David had it all planned out: become the youngest partner at Goldman Sachs, launch his own investment firm, and make his first billion before 40. He achieved it all, but the cost was etched in the lines of his face and the coldness in his eyes. Sarah Mitchell had been his anchor to humanity. They met at Columbia Business School. She was brilliant, compassionate, and saw through his ambitious facade. For 3 years they built a life together, their small apartment filled with dreams and promises. Sarah worked at a non-profit helping underprivileged children, while David climbed the corporate ladder. They were New York's golden couple until they weren't. The breaking point came when Sarah brought up children. She wanted to start a family. David wanted to wait until he made it. Their arguments grew more frequent, their silences longer. The final night, after a heated discussion about priorities, Sarah left their apartment. David, consumed by an important merger deal, didn't follow. By morning she had vanished, leaving only a note: "Some choices can't be undone." The police found nothing. Sarah's family had no answers. She had simply disappeared, leaving David with a guilt that no amount of success could wash away. He threw himself into work, building Lawrence Investments into a $20 billion empire. His name became synonymous with ruthless efficiency and brilliant strategy. But success bred loneliness. His massive home, filled with priceless art and cutting-edge technology, felt more like a museum than a living space. The staff moved silently through the halls, trained to be invisible. His closest relationship was with his executive assistant, who managed his life with military precision. Every year on Sarah's birthday, David would open a bottle of her favorite wine, a simple Californian Pinot Noir they discovered on their first date. He would sit in his study, staring at their old photographs, wondering how different life might have been if he'd made different choices. The media painted him as a cold-hearted titan of finance, but few knew of the engagement ring still locked in his desk drawer, or the annual donations he made anonymously to Sarah's old non-profit. Therapy hadn't helped. Dating felt mechanical. The women who sought his attention were attracted to his wealth and status, missing the broken man beneath the perfectly tailored suits. His parents, before they passed, had begged him to find happiness beyond work. But David had convinced himself that his chance at a family had left with Sarah that rainy night a decade ago. The only warmth in his life came from his secret hobby, restoring classic cars in his private garage. It was something he and his father used to do, and the smell of motor oil and leather brought back memories of simpler times. The newspapers never caught wind of how the mighty David Lawrence spent his weekends covered in grease, bringing old machines back to life. Now, standing in his garden in the pouring rain, staring at a child who carried echoes of his past, David felt the carefully constructed walls of his life beginning to crumble. The photograph in his trembling hands, the one of him and Sarah at their favorite restaurant in the West Village, was supposed to be locked away with his other memories. Yet here it was, soaked but undeniable, connecting him to an unconscious boy who might hold answers to questions he'd been afraid to ask for 10 years. The security guard's voice crackled through his earpiece, asking if he should call an ambulance. David silenced him with a gesture, his mind racing through the implications of what lay before him. His instinct for self-preservation warred with a deeper pull, one that felt like destiny or redemption. As another crash of thunder shook the night sky, David Lawrence, the man who controlled billions with a single word, found himself facing a decision that no amount of money could simplify. Lawrence Investments occupied the top 10 floors of a gleaming skyscraper in Manhattan's financial district. From his corner office on the 60th floor, David commanded a business empire that spanned continents. The Wall Street Journal called him the Oracle of Madison Avenue, and his quarterly earnings calls could move markets. But lately, the victory felt hollow. His morning routine was a masterpiece of efficiency: 5 a.m. workout with his personal trainer in his home gym, breakfast prepared by his private chef, always the same egg white omelette, avocado toast, black coffee, and in the office by 7 a.m. sharp. His Bentley would glide through the city streets while he reviewed overnight market movements from Asia and Europe. Everything was scheduled, controlled, predictable. But the nightmares had started again. In them, Sarah was always just out of reach, calling his name through a fog of missed opportunities. He'd wake up drenched in sweat, his king-sized bed feeling like an ocean of emptiness. His therapist, Dr. Anderson, suggested the dreams were manifestations of unresolved guilt, but David had stopped attending sessions months ago. Pills helped him sleep, but they couldn't quiet his conscience. The corporate world noticed changes in him. Board meetings that once energized him now felt like elaborate theaters of deception. His reputation for being ruthlessly decisive had evolved into something darker. Lawrence the Liquidator, they called him behind his back, after he dismantled a family-owned business that resisted his takeover. The old David would have worn the nickname as a badge of honor. It felt like another indictment. His executive team walked on eggshells around him. Only Patricia, his CFO of 15 years, dared to challenge his increasingly erratic decisions. Last month, he'd nearly fired her for suggesting he was letting personal issues cloud his judgment on a major acquisition. She was right, of course, but truth had become an unwelcome guest in David's world. The mansion he'd built as a monument to his success had become a prison. 60 rooms of polished marble and hardwood floors, state-of-the-art everything, but not a single family photo on the walls. The staff quarters housed 8 people who maintained his lifestyle with invisible efficiency. His housekeeper, Mrs. Reynolds, had been with him for a decade but still called him Mr. Lawrence with formal distance. Every evening, he'd return home to echoing emptiness. The garage, with its collection of classic cars, offered temporary solace. He'd spend hours restoring a 1965 Mustang, the same model his father taught him to drive in. But even this sanctuary was tainted by memories Sarah had loved watching him work on cars, saying it was when he seemed most human. His wealth attracted parasites. Gold diggers, con artists, long-lost relatives, all seeking a piece of the Lawrence fortune. His legal team handled them efficiently, but each attempt reinforced his isolation. The charity galas he was obligated to attend became exercises in avoiding matchmaking society mothers and their eligible daughters. The media painted a picture of success that felt like a funhouse mirror reflection. Forbes celebrated his bachelor lifestyle in their annual Billionaire issue. Business Insider praised his laser focus on profitability. None of them saw him drinking alone in his study, scrolling through old emails from Sarah that he couldn't bring himself to delete. Recent board meetings had become battlegrounds. Shareholders worried about his increasing focus on non-profitable ventures, particularly his insistence on maintaining struggling companies in low-income areas. They didn't understand that every time he saved a family business, he imagined he was somehow making amends to Sarah, who had always fought for the underdog. His closest friend, if he could call him that, was James Wilson, his personal attorney. James had been there through the Sarah investigation, had watched David transform from an ambitious young executive into a hardened business titan. Lately, even James had been hinting that David needed to find balance before he self-destructed. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had sacrificed a life with Sarah to build this empire, and now the empire itself felt like a monument to his greatest failure. The billions in his bank accounts couldn't buy back time or heal old wounds. His talent for making money had become a curse, a constant reminder of what he'd valued most when it mattered least. As another sleepless night approached, David stood at his office window, watching the city lights blur through the threatening rain. A notification blinked on his phone, another all-cash offer for his childhood home in Connecticut, the last property he owned that held genuine memories. He declined it without hesitation, just as thunder began to roll across the darkening sky, nature itself seeming to echo his turbulent soul. The storm had been brewing all day, matching David's dark mood after a contentious board meeting. By nightfall, Manhattan was under siege from sheets of relentless rain. His security system had been triggering all evening from wind-blown debris, each alert making him increasingly irritable. But this alert was different movement near his prized oak tree, planted the day he bought the mansion. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his study, the security lights cast an eerie glow across his manicured garden. The rain drummed against the glass with increasing intensity, creating a rhythmic backdrop to the thunder that rolled across the sky. David had been about to call his head of security when he saw a small shadow that shouldn't have been there. His first instinct was to call the police. In this neighborhood, even children could be part of elaborate schemes, but something made him pause. Perhaps it was the way the small figure lay so still, or maybe it was the strange sense of déjà vu that washed over him. Against all his usual protocols, David found himself walking toward the garden door. The rain soaked through his $5,000 Tom Ford suit instantly. Each step across his perfectly manicured lawn brought him closer to what he now could see was a child, no more than 7 or 8 years old. The boy lay curled on his side, dark hair plastered to his pale face, clothes soaked through. Beside him, a weathered wooden box had spilled its contents across the wet grass. David's security chief, Marcus, appeared silently beside him, hand hovering near his concealed weapon. "Sir, please stay back. We don't know if this is a setup," but David was already kneeling beside the boy, his hands reaching out almost of their own accord. The child's skin was cold, but a pulse beat steadily at his neck. Then he saw the photograph. It had partially slid from the wooden box, protected from the rain by a plastic sleeve that had yellowed with age. David's hands trembled as he picked it up. The image was from another lifetime himself and Sarah at Carmela's, their favorite Italian restaurant in the West Village. She was laughing at something he'd said, her head thrown back, dark curls cascading over her shoulders. He remembered the moment perfectly. It was the night before he'd chosen his career over their future. The boy stirred slightly, and David's breath caught in his throat. Even in unconsciousness, the child's features were hauntingly familiar. The same delicate nose, the curve of his cheeks, they were Sarah's features, unmistakably so. Beside the photo lay a handwritten letter, the ink running in the rain but still legible. The first line made his heart stop. "Dear David, by the time you read this." Marcus was calling for an ambulance, his voice urgent but professional. The garden's security lights cast harsh shadows across the scene, creating a tableau that felt surreal. More security personnel appeared at the garden's edges, their dark suits blending with the night. The storm raged on, but David barely noticed the rain anymore. In the distance, sirens began their urgent wail. David gathered the boy in his arms, surprised at how light he felt. The child's head lolled against his chest, one small hand clutching what looked like a worn teddy bear. The wooden box, David noticed, was hand-carved, with initials that made his blood run cold. SM. As he carried the boy toward the house, memories flooded back with devastating clarity. Sarah's last words to him, "Some choices can't be undone," the way she touched her stomach absently during their final argument. The mysterious calls that had gone unanswered in the weeks before she disappeared. All the pieces were there, but he'd been too blind, too focused on his ambitions to see them. Mrs. Reynolds appeared at the door, already holding towels and looking concerned. The house staff moved with practiced efficiency, preparing a guest room, calling David's private physician. But David couldn't take his eyes off the boy's face. In sleep, his expression held the same gentle vulnerability he'd so often seen in Sarah's. The sound of the approaching ambulance grew louder, its lights painting the rain-slicked garden in alternating red and white. David Lawrence, the man who prided himself on being prepared for every contingency, found himself completely unmoored. In his arms lay not just an unconscious child, but what appeared to be the physical manifestation of his greatest regret and possibly his last chance at redemption. By midnight, David's mansion had transformed into a circus of authority. Detective Karen Martinez stood in his study, her weathered notebook open, eyes sharp despite the late hour. Two uniformed officers stationed themselves near the garden entrance, while forensics combed the area where the boy was found. The rain had finally stopped, but its aftermath left the air heavy with tension. "Mr. Lawrence," Martinez began, her tone professional but skeptical, "you're saying you have no idea who this child is?" She glanced at the photograph, now sealed in an evidence bag, then back at David. His soaked suit had been replaced with casual clothes that probably cost more than her monthly salary, but he looked anything but comfortable. The media had already caught wind of the situation. News vans lined the street outside his gates, their satellite dishes reaching into the night sky like mechanical trees. David's PR team was working overtime, fielding calls from every major network. The story was too juicy to ignore. "Billionaire bachelor finds mysterious child in garden." "The boy's been admitted to Mount Sinai," Officer Thompson reported, entering the study. "Mild hypothermia, exhaustion, but otherwise stable. No identification found. Child Services has been notified." David felt his chest tighten at the mention of Child Services. The thought of the boy waking up alone in a hospital made him inexplicably anxious. Patricia, his CFO, arrived despite the hour, taking control of the media situation. She'd always been his fixer, but the look she gave him spoke volumes. This wasn't a corporate crisis she could solve with press releases and strategic statements. The photograph of him and Sarah had already leaked to social media, spawning countless theories and speculation. Detective Martinez's phone buzzed. She stepped aside to take the call, but David caught fragments. "Missing persons. 10 years. Sarah Mitchell case's world tilted slightly. They were connecting the dots faster than he'd anticipated. The detective's expression changed as she returned to face him. "Mr. Lawrence, we need to discuss Sarah Mitchell." Her voice was carefully neutral. "Our records show you were the last person to see her before her disappearance in 2014. The resemblance between this boy and MS. Mitchell is striking." The unspoken accusation hung in the air like smoke. David's lawyer, James Wilson, chose that moment to arrive, bringing with him the sharp scent of expensive cologne and legal authority. "My client has already cooperated fully with the original investigation," he interjected smoothly. "Any questions about Sarah Mitchell should go through me." But David barely heard them. His mind was on the letter, now in police custody, and its devastating first line. The rest of its contents weighed on him like lead. Sarah's words, her explanations, her reasons, they threatened to unravel the carefully constructed narrative of his life. Outside, the media circus grew. Someone had tipped them off about Sarah Mitchell, and the story was evolving by the minute. Social media exploded with old photos of David and Sarah, their relationship dissected by strangers. Lawrence love and Sarah's mystery were trending nationally. Detective Martinez wasn't finished. The boy's approximate age matches the timeline of MS. Mitchell's disappearance. We'll need a DNA test, she paused, watching David's reaction. Unless there's something you'd like to tell us now. James stepped in again, but David raised a hand to silence him. I want to see him, he said quietly. The room stilled. The boy, I want to be there when he wakes up. Martinez and James exchanged glances. The detective opened her mouth to object, but something in David's expression made her hesitate. There will be questions, she warned. The press, child services, the investigation, this won't go away quietly. David knew she was right. His carefully controlled world was about to explode in ways no crisis management team could contain. Mrs. Reynolds appeared at the study door, holding something that made David's heart stop, a small, worn teddy bear found in the boy's grip. So she said softly, I thought you should see this on the bear's faded ribbon collar, was a name, carefully stitched in familiar handwriting, Ethan. The name hit David like a physical blow. Ethan had been Sarah's father's name, a detail few people knew. The coincidence was too precise to be random. Detective Martinez noticed his reaction, making a note in her book. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture that both terrified and captivated him. As dawn approached, David stood at his study window, watching the media vans multiply like mushrooms after rain. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing. Board members, shareholders, reporters. But for the first time in 10 years, the empire he'd built seemed insignificant compared to the small figure lying in a hospital bed across town, carrying with him secrets that could change everything. Mount Sinai Hospital's private wing hummed with quiet efficiency. David sat in an uncomfortable chair outside room 742, his usual commanding presence diminished by exhaustion and worry. Dr. Emily Richardson, the hospital's head of pediatrics, had just finished her examination of Ethan, and her expression made David's stomach tighten. Mr. Lawrence, she began, clutching her tablet. Ethan's condition is more complex than we initially thought. She pulled up several charts on her screen. Beyond the hypothermia and exhaustion, we found evidence of long-term medical neglect. His heart condition should have been treated years ago. The words hit David like physical blows. Heart condition. Medical neglect. The implications were staggering. Through the room's window, he could see Ethan's small form connected to various monitors, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. A police officer stood guard at the door, a reminder that this was no ordinary medical case. He needs immediate surgery, Dr. Richardson continued, her voice softening slightly at David's visible distress. The procedure is complicated and expensive. Without it, she left the sentence hanging, but her meaning was clear. David felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a lead cloak. Child Services Representative Amanda Foster chose that moment to approach, her sensible shoes squeaking on the polished floor. Mr. Lawrence, I understand you're willing to cover the medical expenses, but we need to discuss custody arrangements. Until paternity is established and background checks are completed, Ethan will need to be placed in temporary care after his recovery. David's response was immediate and fierce. He's not going anywhere. The words surprised even him with their intensity. Amanda raised an eyebrow, making notes on her clipboard. Dr. Richardson watched the exchange with professional neutrality, but David caught a glimmer of sympathy in her eyes. Outside the hospital, reporters camped in the parking lot, their cameras trained on every entrance. The story had exploded overnight. Billionaire's secret child, screamed one headline. Sarah Mitchell mystery deepens, declared another. David's phone buzzed constantly with messages from his crisis management team, but he'd stopped reading them hours ago. Detective Martinez arrived with new information. We've traced the boy's movements, she reported quietly. He was living with a foster family in Connecticut until 3 days ago. They reported him missing yesterday morning. She paused, watching David's reaction. The foster mother says he'd been asking questions about his real parents. Found some old newspapers with your picture. A nurse hurried past, entering Ethan's room to check his vitals. David watched through the window as she adjusted medications and checked monitors. The boy looked so small in the hospital bed, his dark hair a stark contrast against the white pillows. The teddy bear with his name sat on the bedside table, a silent guardian. Dr. Richardson returned with test results. "His blood type matches yours, Mr. Lawrence," she said carefully. "The DNA results will take longer," but she trailed off as David stood abruptly, moving to the window. The morning sun cast long shadows across the hospital grounds where more news vans were arriving. James Wilson appeared, looking harried. "David, the board is calling an emergency meeting. They're concerned about the company's stock price. The media speculation is affecting investor confidence." He lowered his voice. "And there's something else. Sarah's family has seen the news. They're flying in from Chicago." The monitors in Ethan's room suddenly erupted in urgent beeping. Dr. Richardson rushed in, followed by a team of nurses. David watched helplessly as they worked over the boy's bed, their movements quick and practiced. Words filtered through the door pressure, dropping "emergency procedure" or "PrEP." "We need to operate now," Dr. Richardson announced, emerging from the room. "There's no time to wait for standard approvals. As the potential father and current guardian, you need to make a decision." She held out a clipboard with consent forms, her expression grave. The world seemed to narrow to this single moment. David thought of Sarah, of choices made and unmade, of 10 years of regret crystallized into this crucial decision. Amanda Foster started to object about proper procedures, but David was already signing the forms, his signature bold and decisive. "Notify the surgical team," Dr. Richardson ordered, taking the forms. "Mr. Lawrence, there are risks you should be aware of," but David cut her off with a raised hand. Through the window he watched as nurses prepared Ethan for transport, their movements efficient but gentle. As they wheeled the boy towards surgery, Ethan's eyes fluttered open briefly. For one heart-stopping moment his gaze met David's. In those eyes, David saw Sarah's determination, her strength, and something else, a second chance he never thought he'd get. Detective Martinez touched his arm lightly. "We'll need to continue our investigation," she said, but her tone had softened. David nodded absently, his attention fixed on the disappearing gurney carrying his possible son, and with him, the key to a decade of mysteries toward an uncertain fate. The hospital's conference room had become a battleground of competing interests. David sat at one end of the long table, James Wilson at his side, facing an array of legal and social service representatives. Through the windows, the New York skyline seemed to mock the gravity of the proceedings with its cheerful morning light. Amanda Foster from Child Services led the discussion, her voice clipped and professional. "Mr. Lawrence, while your financial resources are considerable, custody decisions are based on the child's best interests. Your lifestyle, work commitments, and lack of parenting experience are significant concerns." She shuffled through her papers, not to mention the ongoing police investigation into the circumstances of his appearance. The legal implications were mounting by the hour. Sarah's family's lawyer, Richard Bennett, joined via video conference, his silver hair and stern expression filling one of the wall screens. "My clients have legitimate concerns about Mr. Lawrence's sudden interest in the boy. If paternity is established, they have questions about the past decade of absence." David's media team had set up a temporary command center in an adjacent room, managing the growing crisis. CNN was running special segments on the billionaire's mystery child. Social media exploded with old photos of Sarah, conspiracy theories, and heated debates about wealth and responsibility. Justice for Sarah was trending worldwide. "The Foster family in Connecticut is also asserting their rights," Amanda continued, revealing another layer of complexity. "They've cared for Ethan for the past 3 years and have initiated their own adoption proceedings." The news hit David like a physical blow. The thought of Ethan returning to strangers made his chest tighten. James Wilson leaned forward, his expensive suit creasing slightly. "My client is prepared to take immediate steps to ensure the boy's welfare. We're filing for emergency temporary custody based on biological connection and financial capability to provide optimal care. His tone was measured but firm. The medical situation alone justifies immediate action. Outside the conference room, protesters had begun gathering. Some held signs supporting Sarah's family, others demanded investigations into her disappearance. The hospital had increased security, and David's private team patrolled the corridors, keeping reporters at bay. Detective Martinez entered the room, adding another voice to the complicated chorus. The investigation remains active. We've uncovered some concerning details about the circumstances leading to Ethan finding Mr. Lawrence. She paused, making eye contact with David. Someone helped him plan this. Someone who knew about the photograph, about Sarah's connection to the mansion. The discussion grew heated as various parties argued their positions. Child psychologists emphasized the trauma of multiple relocations. Financial advisors discussed trust funds and educational planning. Security experts outlined potential threats from media and opportunists. Through it all, David remained uncharacteristically quiet, his thoughts with the small figure in recovery room 742. The surgery had been successful, but Ethan remained sedated. The teddy bear with his name still sat vigilant on the bedside table, a silent witness to the storm brewing around its owner. There's also the matter of public interest, Amanda noted, bringing David back to the present. This case has captured national attention. Every decision will be scrutinized, she gestured to the windows, where news helicopters hovered in the distance. The pressure on this child will be immense. Sarah's mother's voice crackled through the video conference system, thick with emotion. We just want to know what happened to our daughter. This boy, he's all we have left of her. The room fell silent, the weight of 10 years of unanswered questions hanging heavy in the air. David finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. I understand everyone's concerns, but while we sit here arguing, there's a 7-year-old boy recovering from heart surgery. A boy who found his way to my door with his mother's photograph and a plea for help. Whatever mistakes I've made, whatever legal battles lie ahead, my priority is his well-being. The statement caused a stir. Amanda made rapid notes, while Richard Bennett's frown deepened on the screen. James Wilson nodded slightly, approving of his client's measured response. Detective Martinez watched thoughtfully, her experienced eyes missing nothing. A nurse interrupted the proceedings with an urgent update. Ethan was showing signs of waking up. The room erupted in movement, various parties asserting their right to be present. David stood slowly, his decision already made. He needs calm and stability right now, not an audience of strangers debating his fate. As if to punctuate his words, a commotion erupted in the hallway. The foster parents had arrived from Connecticut, demanding to see their ward. Security moved to intercept them, adding another layer of chaos to the already complex situation. David straightened his tie, a habit from countless boardroom battles. But this wasn't a corporate takeover or a market strategy. This was about a boy who might be his son, a decade of regret, and a chance at redemption that he hadn't known he was seeking. As he headed toward Ethan's room, the voices of lawyers, social workers, and family members faded behind him. The real battle was just beginning. Does David deserve a like for choosing a child's well-being over his empire? Be the first to show your support. That single click could inspire more stories of redemption. Your heart knows he's earned it. David Lawrence's transformation began not with a grand gesture, but with a simple choice to stay. Against his PR team's advice, he cancelled all business commitments and moved into the hospital suite adjoining Ethan's room. His $10,000 suits were replaced by comfortable sweaters, his Bloomberg terminal by children's books he'd spend hours reading aloud to the sleeping boy. The change in the notorious businessman was stark enough to make headlines. Wall Street wolf turns watchful guardian, declared the New York Times. His board members watched in disbelief as their ruthless CEO ignored urgent calls about a pending hostile takeover, choosing instead to consult with pediatric specialists about post-operative care. Patricia managed Lawrence investments in his absence, sending him concerned messages about shareholder anxiety and dropping stock prices. The empire he'd spent a decade building was showing cracks, but for the first time in his life, David found himself unburdened by the thought. His world had narrowed to the steady beep of heart monitors and the gentle rise and fall of Ethan's chest. Dr. Richardson noticed the change first. The arrogant billionaire who demanded private wings and special treatment had been replaced by a man who learned nurses' names, who asked detailed questions about medication schedules, who kept a meticulous log of Ethan's vital signs. She'd catch him late at night, practicing how to change bandages on a medical dummy, determined to be prepared. The media camped outside captured glimpses of a different David Lawrence. Gone was the stern-faced tycoon from magazine covers. Security cameras caught him pacing the pediatric ward at night, or sitting by Ethan's bed reading the little prince Sarah's favorite book. The photos went viral, sparking discussions about wealth, responsibility, and redemption. His transformation extended beyond the hospital walls. Late one night, reviewing Ethan's medical history, David discovered the boy's previous foster families had struggled with medical bills. By morning, he'd established a foundation to support children with heart conditions, pledging half his personal fortune. The business world was stunned, but David felt a peace he hadn't known in years. The change wasn't just external. During long nights by Ethan's bedside, David found himself confronting truths he'd buried under years of ambition. He wrote long letters to Sarah that he'd never send, finally allowing himself to feel the full weight of his choices. The hospital staff would find him in the chapel at odd hours, something the formerly pragmatic businessman would have scoffed at weeks ago. Even James Wilson, his longtime lawyer, barely recognized his client. The man who once spent hours fine-tuning hostile takeover strategies now devoted the same attention to learning about child psychology and cardiac care. When James brought urgent contracts requiring his signature, he found David creating a paper crane mobile for Ethan's room, following tutorials on his iPad with intense concentration. Mrs. Reynolds arrived daily with fresh clothes and home-cooked meals, but often found them untouched. Instead, she'd discovered David in the hospital cafeteria, sharing coffee with parents of other sick children, listening to their stories with a humility that would have been unthinkable mere weeks ago. The transformation wasn't without its costs. Business news channels speculated about his mental state. Competitors moved in on deals he'd spent years cultivating. A major investor publicly questioned his fitness to lead. But David's only response was to increase his foundation's initial funding, adding programs for medical research and family support services. Detective Martinez, still investigating Sarah's disappearance, observed the change during her regular visits. The defensive, guarded businessman had been replaced by someone more vulnerable, more human. She watched him learn to give Ethan medication, handle feeding tubes, change dressings, tasks no amount of money could delegate. Perhaps the most profound change was in his priorities. When Ethan developed post-operative complications, David didn't hesitate to sign over controlling interest in his newest acquisition to raise funds for experimental treatment. The business world was shocked, but David felt only clarity. The man who once measured his worth in billions now counted success in small victories. Ethan's first post-surgery smile, a slight improvement in test results, 5 minutes of peaceful sleep. As dawn broke over Manhattan one morning, Dr. Richardson found David asleep in the uncomfortable hospital chair, still holding Ethan's hand. On the bedside table lay his resignation letter as CEO, half finished. Next to it sat a well-worn copy of adoption paperwork, the pages marked with careful notes in his precise handwriting. The transformation of David Lawrence, it seemed, was just beginning. The first time Ethan fully regained consciousness, his fearful eyes met David's with a mixture of recognition and uncertainty. "You're the man from the picture," he whispered, his voice hoarse from the breathing tube. David's heart clenched at the familiar inflection, so like Sarah's that it took his breath away. The initial days were delicate. Ethan was guarded, speaking little, watching everything with careful, assessing eyes that seemed too old for his 7 years. David learned patience he never knew he possessed, sitting quietly for hours, respecting the boy's silence while maintaining a steady, comforting presence. Progress came in small moments. When Ethan developed a fever and became distressed one night, it was David's voice reading The Little Prince that finally calmed him. The nurse found them both asleep at dawn, the book open between them. Something shifted after that night, a fragile trust beginning to form. Ethan's questions, when they came, were careful and precise. "Did you really know my mom?" he asked one afternoon, clutching his teddy bear. David answered honestly, sharing carefully chosen memories of Sarah, her laugh, her kindness, her love of rainy days. He watched Ethan absorb each detail like precious treasures, filling in the blank spaces of his history. The breakthrough came unexpectedly during a difficult physical therapy session. Frustrated by pain and weakness, Ethan burst into tears. Without thinking, David gathered him close, and for the first time, the boy didn't pull away. They sat together, Ethan's small frame shaking with sobs, while David murmured the same soothing words he remembered Sarah using during thunderstorms. Learning to be a father meant learning new languages, the language of dinosaurs and superheroes, of midnight fears and morning giggles. David discovered that his business skills translated strangely well, negotiating one more story. Before bedtime, strategizing ways to make medicine time easier, building trust through consistent promises kept. The hospital staff watched the relationship evolve with professional interest. Dr. Richardson noted how Ethan's vital signs stabilized faster when David was present. The physical therapist reported better cooperation during sessions where David participated. Even the usually skeptical Detective Martinez softened watching their growing bond. There were setbacks. Nightmares plagued Ethan's sleep, leaving him crying for a mother he barely remembered. David learned to respond not with solutions, as his business instincts urged, but with presence, sitting quietly, offering comfort, being the steady anchor Sarah would have wanted him to be. They developed rituals, morning crossword puzzles done together in bed, David helping Ethan with the harder words, evening paper crane folding sessions, their growing flock decorating the hospital room in bright colors, weekend picnics, where David smuggled in Ethan's favorite foods, carefully cleared by the medical team. The boy's personality emerged gradually, like a flower opening. David discovered Ethan's quick wit, his passion for space exploration, his gentle way with younger patients on the pediatric floor. Each revelation felt like a gift, a piece of Sarah living on in their son. Child psychologist Dr. Susan Chen observed their interactions with professional interest. "He's building secure attachment," she noted in her reports. Despite the unusual circumstances, Ethan shows signs of developing healthy emotional bonds. Her words gave David hope, even as they highlighted the responsibility he carried. Sometimes Ethan would ask about the before time, his life with foster families, the years David missed. These conversations were the hardest, requiring a delicate balance of truth and age-appropriate explanation. David learned to listen more than speak, to validate feelings rather than make excuses. Their days fell into a rhythm. Morning medical rounds, where Ethan now confidently asked his own questions. Afternoon lessons with the hospital tutor, David sitting quietly nearby, marveling at his son's quick mind. Evenings spent planning for a future together, building castles of possibility with words and dreams. The transformation in Ethan was remarkable. Hospital staff who remembered the frightened, silent boy now encountered a child who smiled, who joked with nurses, who faced painful procedures with growing courage. "He feels safe," Dr. Richardson observed. "That's the foundation of healing." One rainy evening, as they watched lightning illuminate the city skyline, Ethan asked the question David had been both hoping for and dreading, "Can I stay with you forever?" The business titan who once commanded boardrooms found himself speechless, able only to pull his son closer, trying to convey through touch what words couldn't adequately express. Their bond strengthened not through grand gestures but in quiet moments, teaching Ethan to tie his shoes, learning together to make origami stars, holding hands during difficult medical tests. David discovered that trust, like love, was built in these small, consistent acts of care. As Ethan's physical strength grew, so did his confidence in their relationship. The boy who once flinched at sudden movements now reached for David's hand naturally, claiming his space in his father's life with the simple faith of a child who finally felt at home. The story of David Lawrence and Ethan captivated the nation, spawning countless headlines, talk show debates, and social media movements. The New York social elite, who had long viewed David as one of their own, found themselves divided. Some praised his transformation as inspirational, others whispered about mental breakdowns and midlife crises. Billion Dollar Baby, the real story, screamed the tabloids, while more respectable publications ran thoughtful pieces about wealth, responsibility, and redemption. The Wall Street Journal's editorial board questioned his fitness to lead Lawrence Investments, while People magazine named him Most Inspiring Father of the Year. Social media exploded with opposing hashtags. Team David celebrated his choice to prioritize Ethan over his empire, while Save Ethan advocates argued that a ruthless businessman couldn't possibly be fit for fatherhood. Every hospital visit, every candid photo became fodder for endless online debates about privilege, parenting, and the price of redemption. Sarah's disappearance resurfaced in public consciousness. True crime podcasts dedicated episodes to theorizing about her fate. Online sleuths combed through decades-old photographs, seeking clues. Conspiracy theories flourished, some painting David as a villain, others as a victim of elaborate schemes. The business world reacted with predictable alarm. Lawrence Investments' stock price fluctuated wildly as shareholders debated the implications of their CEO's dramatic lifestyle change. Competitors circled like sharks, sensing weakness. CNBC ran special reports asking, "Has David Lawrence lost his edge?" Protesters gathered daily outside the hospital, their signs reflecting society's divided opinion. "Children need love, not money," read some, while others proclaimed "let them be." Family hospital security worked overtime managing the crowds, while social media amplified every interaction. Celebrity personalities took sides. Talk show hosts debated the ethics of wealth and responsibility. Medical experts discussed the psychological impact on Ethan. Child welfare advocates argued about the precedent this case might set for future custody battles. The Connecticut foster family appeared on morning shows, sharing their side of the story. Their tearful interviews painted a picture of a happy home disrupted by wealth and power. Their lawyers filed injunctions, adding legal drama to the already complex situation. Religious leaders joined the conversation, some praising David's transformation as divine intervention, others questioning his motives. Local churches organized prayer vigils outside the hospital, their hymns mixing with reporters' questions and protesters' chants. Professional opinions varied wildly. Child psychologists debated the impact of sudden lifestyle changes on Ethan's development. Business analysts predicted the end of David's corporate reign. Social workers argued about precedents and protocols being broken. The hospital itself became a media circus. Every doctor's visit, every specialist consultation became news. Reporters tracked the comings and goings of medical staff, lawyers, and social workers. Even the cafeteria workers found themselves being interviewed about David's new eating habits. Sarah's family's public statements added another layer of complexity. Their televised plea for privacy, while simultaneously sharing old family photos, created new waves of public interest. Their lawyers' carefully worded statements hinted at future legal challenges. Fashion magazines noted David's transformation from tailored suits to casual wear, analyzing the symbolism of his wardrobe change. Interior design publications speculated about his mansion's rumored renovations to accommodate a child. Every aspect of his life was dissected, analyzed, judged. The legal community buzzed with discussions about precedent. Law reviews published articles about the intersection of wealth, custody rights, and public interest. Bar associations organized seminars using the case as a study in modern family law. Public opinion shifted daily with each new revelation. When photos leaked of David sleeping in an uncomfortable hospital chair, still holding Ethan's hand, social media erupted with emotional responses. When business news reported the value of abandoned deals, critics questioned his judgment. Academic circles produced papers analyzing the sociological implications. Universities hosted panels discussing wealth inequality, healthcare access, and the power of media narratives. The case became a lightning rod for broader social debates. Throughout it all, David maintained his focus on Ethan, ignoring the circus around them. His silence in the face of criticism only fueled more speculation. His refusal to engage with the media narrative created a vacuum that society rushed to fill with its own interpretations. The hospital's pediatric wing became an unexpected battlefield of public opinion. Other parents either fiercely protected the father-son duo's privacy or sold their stories to tabloids. Every nurse, doctor, and janitor found themselves unwitting characters in an ongoing public drama. As weeks passed, the story evolved. Initial skepticism about David's motives gave way to more nuanced discussions about second chances and redemption. Society's reaction became a mirror, reflecting its own complex relationships with wealth, power, and the possibility of genuine change. Yet within the hospital room, father and son remained in their own world, building their relationship one quiet moment at a time, while outside, society continued its endless debate about love, money, and the price of redemption. As autumn painted Central Park in shades of gold, Ethan finally left the hospital. David had transformed his mansion's east wing into a child's paradise, but it was the small moments that truly built their bond. Each morning began with their ritual chocolate chip pancakes approved by the nutritionist. Sharing sections of the newspaper, Ethan claimed the comics, David the business pages, and planning their day together. The first breakthrough came during a nightmare. Ethan's terrified screams echoed through the mansion at 3 a.m., and David reached him before the night staff. Without hesitation, he gathered the trembling boy in his arms, something he'd seen Sarah do with scared children at her nonprofit. "I'm here, buddy," he whispered, rocking gently. "I've got you." When Ethan finally relaxed, his small hand clutching David's t-shirt, something fundamental shifted between them. Their shared love of cars became a bridge. David introduced Ethan to his classic car collection, teaching him about engines and restoration. The garage became their sanctuary, where titles and fortunes didn't matter. Ethan's eyes lit up learning about carburetors and timing belts, his questions growing more confident each day. When he correctly diagnosed a problem with the Mustang's fuel injection, David's pride was palpable. The learning went both ways. Ethan taught David about dinosaurs, space exploration, and the importance of building proper pillow forts. The mansion's formal living room often transformed into an elaborate constellation of blankets and cushions where they'd spend hours reading adventure stories. Mrs. Reynolds would find them asleep among the pillows, David's arm protectively around his son. Their morning routine evolved to include adventure walks in the garden, where Ethan catalogued insects and plants in a journal, just as Sarah used to do. David learned the names of butterflies and beetles, his businessman's precision finding new purpose in helping Ethan record their discoveries. They planted a vegetable garden together, marking growth progress with the same attention David once gave to stock prices. Physical therapy continued at home, but David transformed it into games. They created obstacle courses throughout the mansion, timing each other and celebrating improvements. When Ethan grew frustrated with his limitations, David shared stories of his own childhood struggles with asthma, building understanding through shared vulnerability. The staff watched in amazement as their employer changed. The man who once demanded perfection now laughed at spilled milk and crayon marks on expensive wallpaper. His home office, once a fortress of solitude, now featured a small desk beside his own where Ethan would work. Alongside him, drawing pictures or doing homework. Meals became family time, no phones allowed. David learned to cook Ethan's favorite dishes, his perfectionist nature channeled into mastering mac and cheese and dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets. They invented silly dinner games, rating each dish with elaborate scoring systems that often dissolved into laughter. And their evening routine became sacred. Bath time adventures with toy boats, then story time where they took turns creating voices for characters. David discovered he had a talent for silly voices, something that delighted Ethan endlessly. They'd end each day with gratitude time, sharing their favorite moments, building emotional awareness together. Weekends were for adventures. They explored New York like tourists, David seeing his city anew through Ethan's eyes. The Natural History Museum became their second home, where David's donations ensured private access to exhibits. Ethan's growing confidence showed in how he'd explain dinosaur facts to other visitors, standing straighter when they called him Professor. The bond deepened through shared secrets. Ethan confided his fears about hospital checkups. David admitted his anxiety about board meetings. They developed a secret handshake, a private language of gestures that meant I'm here, I understand, we're in this together. During difficult moments, a simple squeeze of hands could convey volumes. David learned to navigate the complexities of a 7-year-old's emotional world. He discovered that sometimes Ethan needed space to process feelings, just like Sarah used to. He learned when to offer solutions and when to simply listen, when to distract with games and when to acknowledge pain. Their relationship weathered its first real storm when Ethan, overtired and scared before a medical checkup, shouted that he missed his real mom. Instead of retreating into hurt, David held space for Ethan's grief, sharing stories about Sarah until they both cried, then laughed, then held each other closer. As autumn turned to winter, their bond strengthened through tradition building. They created elaborate holiday decorations, baked cookies with varying degrees of success, and started a collection of matching ugly sweaters. The mansion, once featured in architectural magazines for its austere elegance, became a home filled with finger paintings and Lego constructions. The transformation was most evident in the small moments, David automatically reaching to steady Ethan on stairs, Ethan unconsciously leaning into his father's side while watching movies, both of them developing inside jokes and shared references that excluded even their closest staff. Their growing connection showed in synchronized movements and finished sentences, in the way they gravitated toward each other in crowded rooms, in how Ethan's laugh began to carry echoes of David's. The staff noticed how they'd adopted each other's mannerisms, Ethan's thoughtful head tilt, David's expressive hand gestures. One evening, as they stargazed from the garden, another passion they shared, Ethan asked about Sarah. Instead of deflecting, David shared stories of her kindness, her passion for helping others, her love of rainy days. As Ethan drifted to sleep in his arms, David realized that in helping his son know his mother, he was healing his own heart. Each day brought new challenges and victories, tears and laughter, fears and brave moments. Through it all, their bond grew stronger, deeper, more resilient. The business titan, who once measured success in billions, now counted it in hugs, in shared smiles, in the quiet "I love you, Dad," whispered at bedtime. In finding each other, father and son had found themselves. While David and Ethan built their world inside the mansion's walls, outside forces gathered like storm clouds. Lawrence Investments Board called an emergency meeting, their concerns echoing through the mahogany-paneled boardroom. The company has lost $2 billion in market value, announced Thomas Reynolds, the lead director. Shareholders are demanding action. Media scrutiny intensified daily. Paparazzi camped outside Ethan's new school, forcing David to hire additional security. Photos of their weekend outings appeared in tabloids, each moment analyzed and critiqued. Lawrence Air S $500 sneakers screamed one headline, turning even their shoe shopping into controversy. Sarah's family escalated their legal challenge. Their lawyers filed motions questioning David's fitness as a parent, citing his workaholic past and demanding psychological evaluations. Each court filing brought fresh waves of media attention, forcing David to shield Ethan from news channels and social media. The Connecticut foster family launched a public campaign, appearing on morning shows with tear-stained faces. "He was our son for 3 years," Mrs. Anderson sobbed on Good Morning America. "Now this billionaire thinks he can buy a family." Their interviews sparked heated debates about privilege and parenting rights. Corporate raiders sensed weakness. Carl Mitchell, no relation to Sarah, launched a hostile takeover attempt, targeting Lawrence Investments' vulnerable subsidiaries. The business press circled like vultures, publishing speculation about the empire's imminent collapse. David's phone buzzed constantly with crisis alerts. Social services continued their scrutiny. Amanda Foster made surprise visits, questioning staff about routines and stability. Her reports noted the mansion's transformation from showplace to home, but raised concerns about the intense public interest surrounding Ethan. Each visit left David tense, aware of how much he could lose. Detective Martinez hadn't closed Sarah's case. Her team uncovered new leads, requiring difficult interviews that left David emotionally drained. Each revelation about Sarah's final months brought fresh guilt and questions. The investigation's shadows threatened the fragile peace he'd built with Ethan. The pressure affected their household. Security protocols tightened after receiving threatening letters from Sarah's conspiracy theorists. Staff underwent enhanced background checks. Even Mrs. Reynolds, despite decades of service, faced new scrutiny. The mansion began to feel like a gilded cage. David's former social circle divided. Some society friends withdrew party invitations, viewing his transformation with suspicion. Others sought to exploit the situation, attempting to sell stories to tabloids. Trust became a rare commodity, forcing David to carefully guard their private moments. Professional challenges mounted. Board members questioned his judgment in major decisions. Competitors poached key executives, sensing uncertainty. The business empire he'd built over decades showed cracks, requiring attention he was reluctant to give while focusing on Ethan. The custody battle intensified. Court-appointed evaluators interviewed Ethan, their questions stirring painful memories. Child psychologists debated the impact of sudden lifestyle changes. Guardian ad litem reports highlighted both progress and concerns, leaving their future uncertain. Financial pressures emerged unexpectedly. While David's personal wealth remained substantial, the growing legal fees and security costs combined with falling stock prices created complex challenges. Investment banks began questioning loan terms, sensing vulnerability in the Lawrence business empire. Health concerns added another layer of stress. Ethan's recovery required ongoing monitoring, each hospital visit drawing media attention. Medical privacy became another battlefield, forcing David to create elaborate security protocols just for routine checkups. The public's fascination grew overwhelming. Strangers approached them in restaurants, wanting photos or sharing unsolicited opinions. Online forums debated every aspect of their lives. Fan clubs and protest groups formed, each claiming to represent their best interests. Educational challenges emerged. Private schools worried about media disruption, while public schools lacked necessary security. David eventually hired private tutors, adding to accusations of isolating Ethan. Every decision faced public scrutiny and criticism. Political dimensions surfaced unexpectedly. Legislators cited their case in debates about adoption laws and wealth inequality. Advocacy groups used their story to push various agendas. Their private journey became a public referendum on privilege and parenthood. Religious groups added another layer of complexity. Some churches organized prayer vigils supporting their bond, others condemned the unconventional family structure. Each public statement sparked new debates and media coverage. The pressure began showing in small ways. Ethan grew quieter in public. clinging closer to David. Dark circles appeared under David's eyes as he juggled multiple crises. Their peaceful morning routines increasingly faced interruption from urgent calls and legal emergencies. Sarah's old colleagues from the non-profit sector spoke out, some supporting David's transformation, others questioning his motives. Each interview dredged up past relationships and choices, forcing David to confront his former self while trying to be present for Ethan. The weight of constant scrutiny affected their daily lives. Simple activities like grocery shopping or park visits required elaborate security arrangements. Ethan's playdate invitations dwindled as other parents feared media attention. Their world began shrinking under the pressure. Yet within these constraints, their bond strengthened. Each external challenge pushed them closer together, creating an unshakable unit. David learned to balance crisis management with bedtime stories, board meetings with soccer practice. Their love grew more resilient against the storm of public opinion and legal battles. Through it all, they maintained their essential rituals: morning pancakes, evening stories, weekend adventures. These moments became anchors in the chaos, reminding them that their connection transcended the external pressures trying to tear them apart. In facing these challenges together, father and son forged a bond that no headline or court filing could break. The discovery came by accident. While helping Ethan organize his belongings from the hospital, David found a hidden compartment in the old wooden box. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with Sarah's distinctive handwriting. His hands trembled as he opened it, recognizing the date exactly 1 month after she disappeared. "My dearest Ethan," the first entry began, "I hope someday you'll understand why I had to leave." The words blurred as David read about Sarah's discovery of her pregnancy, her fear of disrupting his meteoric rise in finance, her heartbreaking decision to disappear. Each page revealed a parallel life he'd never known existed, filled with Sarah's hopes, fears, and unwavering love for their son. The journal documented Ethan's early years through Sarah's eyes. First steps taken in a small apartment in Chicago. First words spoken while she worked 2 jobs to support them. Birthday celebrations in humble circumstances, each one marked with a pressed flower, and Sarah's careful observations of their growing boy's personality. All devastating discoveries followed. Medical records showed Sarah had detected her illness early, but chose alternative treatments to save money for Ethan's future. Letters addressed to David but never sent revealed her internal struggle, wanting to reach out but fearing disruption to both their lives. Each revelation was a fresh wound, a glimpse of what might have been. Photos tucked between journal pages told their own story. Sarah's gradual physical decline captured in selfies with a smiling Ethan, holiday celebrations in modest surroundings, their love evident despite limited means. The final photos, taken months before her death, showed Sarah in a hospital bed, still managing to smile as she held their son. The most shocking discovery was a legal document dated 3 days before Sarah's death. She had meticulously planned Ethan's journey to David, including the photograph and letter. A network of trusted friends had helped execute her final wish, ensuring their son would find his way home when she could no longer care for him. David spent nights poring over these artifacts of their lost years, his heart breaking anew with each revelation. He learned how Sarah had followed his career from afar, clipping newspaper articles about his success while working as a waitress to support their son. Her pride in his achievements mingled with sadness at their separation on every page. The journal's final entry, written in shaking handwriting, was addressed to David. "I never stopped loving you. Take care of our boy. Help him understand that sometimes love means making impossible choices. He has your determination and my heart, a combination that will serve him well." These discoveries changed everything. David began seeing traces of Sarah in Ethan's mannerisms, the way he furrowed his brow when concentrating, his infectious laugh, his instinctive kindness to others. The journal helped him understand their son's complex emotional landscape, shaped by years of love and loss. Among the papers, David found evidence of Sarah's continued connection to their shared past. She'd kept his business cards from their dating years, theater ticket stubs, even the napkin where he'd first written his phone number. Her devotion to these mementos spoke of a love that had never died, only transformed. Most poignant were the birthday letters she'd written to David each year, never sent but carefully preserved. They detailed Ethan's growth, his achievements, his challenges. Reading them, David felt the weight of missed moments, first steps, first words, first days of school, each one documented with a mother's loving attention to detail. The box also contained practical documents, Ethan's medical history, school records, and a carefully curated collection of family photos showing Sarah's side of the family. She had created a comprehensive archive of their son's life, ensuring he would know his full heritage when the time came. Sarah's illness journey was documented in clinical detail, revealing her fierce determination to survive for Ethan. Alternative treatments, experimental protocols, support group testimonials, all carefully researched and annotated in her increasingly unsteady handwriting. Her final months showed a shift from seeking cure to preparing Ethan for life without her. David discovered Sarah had maintained a secret connection to his world. She'd created a trust fund for Ethan with her modest savings, investing in Lawrence investment stock as her way of keeping them connected to their father. The account statements showed small, regular purchases, a waitress's wages turned into shares of his company. Among the most touching discoveries were recordings Sarah had made for Ethan. Her voice, though weakened by illness, remained warm as she shared family stories, life advice, and messages of love. David recognized the cadence of Ethan's bedtime reading in Sarah's gentle storytelling, another inheritance from mother to son. Each discovery brought fresh waves of emotion. David found himself sharing carefully chosen details with Ethan, helping him piece together the puzzle of his early years. Together, they created a memory wall in Ethan's room, honoring Sarah's journey and celebrating the love that had guided their son home. The final discovery was perhaps the most profound, a letter Sarah had written to David's parents, apologizing for taking their grandchild away but expressing hope for eventual reconciliation. His parents had passed never knowing they had a grandson, another layer of loss in their complex family story. These revelations transformed David's understanding of love, sacrifice, and redemption. Sarah's journal became a guidebook for understanding their son, her insights helping him navigate Ethan's emotional needs. Through her words, she continued to parent them both, bridging past and present with wisdom and grace. As David closed the journal each night, he felt Sarah's presence guiding them forward. Her documented journey became a testament to love's endurance, a legacy that would shape their future together. In discovering their past, father and son found a deeper understanding of their present and a clearer path to their future. The crisis struck without warning. One moment Ethan was laughing during their morning pancake ritual, the next he clutched his chest, face pale, eyes wide with fear. David's world narrowed to the sound of his son's labored breathing and the terrifying realization that history might be repeating itself. The emergency response team arrived within minutes, their efficiency barely masking their concern. Dr. Richardson, reached on her private line, was already racing to Mount Sinai. The same hospital corridor that had witnessed their growing bond now echoed with the urgent squeak of gurney wheels and rapid-fire medical terminology. His heart's showing signs of rejection, Dr. Richardson explained, her usual calm demeanor strained. The next 24 hours a critical David stood frozen, watching through glass doors as medical staff swarmed around his son. The machines that had become familiar friends now seemed like harbingers of doom, their alarms piercing the sterile hospital air. Sarah's journal entries about her own illness flashed through David's mind. The same hospital, similar machines, different decade. He found himself making the same bargains with God that Sarah had documented in her final pages, offering everything he owned for one more chance. The waiting room became a war room. Medical specialists were flown in from around the world, their credentials impressive but offering little comfort. David paced the familiar corridor, his designer shoes marking time against the linoleum, each step a prayer, each turn a plea for mercy. Ethan's previous foster parents arrived, their media crew in tow, but David barely registered their presence. Amanda Foster appeared with emergency custody papers, her voice a distant buzz against the roar in his ears. Even Detective Martinez suspended her investigation, her usual professional distance softening at the sight of David's raw fear. Hours blurred together. Dr. Richardson emerged periodically with updates, each one carefully worded but increasingly grave. The experimental treatment they'd been considering was now their only option, but it carried significant risks. The decision fell to David, the weight of fatherhood never feeling heavier. "We'd need your consent for the procedure," Dr. Richardson explained, sliding over forms that could determine Ethan's fate. "But I must warn you the success rate is only 30%. David's hand shook as he reached for the pen, remembering Sarah's similar moment of decision, documented in her journal. The procedure would cost millions, far exceeding insurance coverage. Without hesitation, David authorized the sale of his personal art collection, including pieces he'd spent decades acquiring. His financial advisors protested, but he silenced them with a look that reminded everyone of the ruthless businessman he'd once been. In the hours before surgery, Ethan's lucid moments were precious and terrifying. "Dad," he whispered during one, his small hand reaching for David's. I'm scared the word Dad, still new enough to catch David's breath, carried the weight of complete trust. David held his son close, promising protection he wasn't sure he could provide. The surgical team prepared while David read Ethan's favorite story one last time. The hospital staff, who had watched their relationship bloom, moved quietly around them, many wiping away tears. Mrs. Reynolds arrived with Ethan's teddy bear, now wearing a tiny hospital gown matching his owner's. As they wheeled Ethan toward surgery, David felt the same helplessness Sarah must have experienced. The journal's descriptions of maternal fear now resonated with painful clarity. He followed the gurney as far as allowed, memorizing every detail of his son's face, fighting the terrifying thought that this might be their last moment. The surgical waiting room became David's purgatory. Each tick of the clock echoed like thunder. Each passing nurse's footsteps caused his heart to jump. He clutched Sarah's journal, reading her words of courage, trying to channel her strength. The tough businessman who once commanded boardrooms now openly wept, surprising even himself with the depth of his emotion. Hours passed. Dr. Richardson's updates became shorter, more technical, hiding behind medical terminology what she couldn't say directly. The experimental treatment was taking longer than expected. Ethan's vital signs remained unstable. The next hour would be crucial. Each report left David more desperate for Sarah's guidance. The hospital chapel, a place he'd never visited before Ethan, became his sanctuary. David found himself bargaining, promising, pleading, offering his entire fortune, his company, everything he'd built, in exchange for his son's life. The irony of prioritizing family over fortune, exactly what he'd failed to do with Sarah, wasn't lost on him. Outside, the media circus grew. News of the experimental procedure leaked, spawning headlines about billionaire's last-ditch effort and price tag of father's love. David ignored them all. His world shrunk to the space between the surgical doors and the chapel, each step a prayer, each breath a hope. Finally, after what felt like eternity, Dr. Richardson emerged, her surgical mask still in place. David tried to read her eyes, searching for any sign. The moment stretched like elastic, the entire hospital holding its breath. Everything he'd gained and lost, every choice that led to this moment, hung suspended in that single instant before she spoke. While Ethan fought for life in the operating room, David's business empire faced its own critical moment. Carl Mitchell, the notorious corporate raider, launched his most aggressive attack yet. Lawrence Investments is rudderless, he declared on CNBC. The shareholders deserve better than a CEO playing house. The board called an emergency meeting via video conference, their faces grim on the hospital room's laptop screen. The hostile takeover bid is gaining traction, Thomas Reynolds reported. Major shareholders are jumping ship. We need you back in the office, David. Now. The ultimatum hung in the air, heavy with implications. Patricia, his loyal CFO, fought desperately to hold the lines. We've lost another 15% in market value since morning, she reported, her voice tight with stress. The vultures are circling our Asian subsidiaries. Without immediate intervention, we'll lose control of key assets. Each update felt like another blow, but David's eyes remained fixed on the surgical ward doors. The Wall Street Journal ran a scathing analysis. Lawrence Empire in free fall. The price of personal redemption. Stock prices plummeted as investors responded to speculation about David's mental state and ability to lead. Decades of careful business building seemed to be unraveling in hours. Corporate rivals seized the opportunity. Competing firms poached top executives, offering generous packages to jump ship. Client accounts that had been loyal for years began exploring other options. The business world smelled blood in the water, and the feeding frenzy intensified. Legal threats mounted. Shareholder lawsuits were filed, claiming breach of fiduciary duty. The board's lawyers prepared documents to force an emergency leadership change. Even James Wilson, David's longtime attorney, advised that his position as CEO might be legally untenable. The company's stock hit a 5-year low. Trading was temporarily halted twice to prevent further freefall. Financial analysts predicted the end of the Lawrence business dynasty, their charts and graphs painting a picture of inevitable decline. The empire David had sacrificed everything to build was crumbling. Carl Mitchell's team made their move, offering to buy controlling interest at a predatory price. The proposal came with a cruel twist. They would retain David as a figurehead CEO, but only if he resolved his personal situation, a thinly veiled demand to give up Ethan. International markets reacted to the chaos. The company's Asian partnerships, carefully cultivated over decades, began distancing themselves. European investors demanded emergency meetings. The global empire David had built was unraveling across time zones. Patricia fought back with everything she had. She orchestrated press releases, called in favors, and worked to shore up key relationships. But without David's presence, his personal touch that had built so many crucial connections, her efforts felt like placing bandages on a hemorrhaging wound. The board's patience reached its limit. An official vote was called to remove David as CEO. The same people who had celebrated his business genius now cited his emotional instability and neglect of duties as grounds for immediate termination. The betrayal stung, but David barely registered it. Financial reporters camped outside the hospital, shouting questions about the company's future. Market analysts debated the Lawrence legacy in past tense. Social media exploded with memes about the billionaire who lost everything for love, some cruel, some celebrating his choice. The major clients began invoking contract clauses that required David's personal oversight. Deals years in the making threatened to collapse. The dominoes of his business empire fell one by one, each failure reported in real time by gleeful competitors and shocked analysts. The human cost mounted. Employees watched their stock options plummet in value. Retirement plans built around company stock faced devastation. The corporate headquarters buzzed with rumors of imminent layoffs. The family David had created in business was facing dissolution. Carl Mitchell's team pressed their advantage, approaching board members individually with promises of golden parachutes in exchange for support. The loyalty David had built over years crumbled in the face of financial self-interest. Even longtime allies began to waver. Legal documents piled up requiring David's immediate attention. Merger agreements, client contracts, international partnerships all needed his signature or personal appearance to prevent catastrophic collapse. The weight of an empire pressed against the hospital room doors. Patricia made one last desperate attempt to save the company. She proposed a temporary leadership structure, begging David to at least make a public statement. Her voice cracked as she described the chaos engulfing their corporate family. But David's attention remained fixed on the medical updates. The board's final ultimatum arrived via courier: return to full-time leadership immediately or face unanimous removal. The document was accompanied by papers requiring him to step down as Ethan's guardian, citing his inability to balance responsibilities. The choice was brutally clear. Carl Mitchell appeared on Bloomberg, smugly discussing his plans for dismantling Lawrence Investments. The empire would be sold off piece by piece, its parts worth more than its whole. Decades of building would be undone in months of calculated destruction. David watched his life's work disintegrate from the hospital waiting room, news alerts buzzing on his phone like angry wasps. Each notification announced another piece of his empire falling away. The business titan, who once commanded global markets, now sat powerless, his attention focused entirely on a different kind of survival. In the depths of his darkest hour, David faced the ultimate collision of his past and present. While Ethan fought for life in surgery and his empire crumbled, Sarah's family arrived with devastating news. They'd discovered letters revealing Sarah had tried to contact him multiple times during her pregnancy, messages intercepted and hidden by his then-assistant under orders to protect his career trajectory. The revelation hit him like a physical blow. Every decision, every ruthless choice he'd made to build his empire now felt poisoned by this betrayal. The assistant, now a successful executive herself, had sent a written confession: "I thought I was protecting your future. Sarah's pregnancy would have derailed the Goldman partnership. I'm sorry." Detective Martinez chose this moment to share her team's findings. Security footage from a decade ago showed Sarah attempting to reach him at his office multiple times in her early pregnancy. Each time, she was turned away with the message that David was unavailable. The final footage showed her leaving, hands protectively over her stomach, tears streaming down her face. Sarah's mother confronted him in the hospital corridor, her voice thick with 10 years of pain. "She believed you knew," she said, hands trembling as she held out more letters. "She thought you had chosen your career over them deliberately." It broke her. The weight of this misunderstanding, of years lost to someone else's manipulation, brought David to his knees. The foster parents added another layer of agony, revealing that Ethan had asked about his father repeatedly during his time with them. They shared videos of birthdays and holidays, moments where Ethan had wished for his father's presence. Each recording was a snapshot of loneliness that David could have prevented. As these revelations crashed over him, the hospital chaplain arrived with news that shook David's foundation further. Sarah had spent her final days in the hospital's hospice unit, just floors away from his current vigil. She had written one last letter, entrusted to the chaplain, to be delivered if David ever found his way to their son. The letter, written in Sarah's increasingly fragile handwriting, detailed her final discoveries about the intercepted messages. She had learned the truth just before her death, but was too weak to try reaching out again. Her words of forgiveness, understanding, and enduring love struck deeper than any business loss could. Amanda Foster returned with court documents revealing another layer of complexity. Sarah had legally named David as Ethan's guardian in her will, but the paperwork had been deliberately misfiled, leading to years of foster care. The system that had kept father and son apart had been built on a foundation of deception. In the hospital's chapel, David confronted the full weight of these revelations. Photos from Sarah's last months showed her receiving treatment in the same hospital where he'd been attending board meetings, their paths possibly crossing without his knowledge. The proximity of their parallel lives, the near misses and stolen chances, felt like a cruel cosmic joke. The media somehow got wind of the intercepted messages story. Headlines screamed about corporate interference in personal lives, about power and corruption destroying families. David's former assistant appeared on morning shows, tearfully defending her actions as misguided loyalty, while public opinion turned even more volatile. Mrs. Reynolds, who had been with David throughout his rise to power, finally shared her own burden of knowledge. She had suspected something was wrong when Sarah's repeated calls stopped suddenly, but had been too afraid of losing her position to speak up. Her confession added another crack to David's already shattered worldview. In Ethan's hospital room, surrounded by machines keeping his son alive, David found Sarah's final diary. The entries revealed her hope that Ethan would somehow find his way to his father, her faith in David's capacity for love surviving even her belief in his rejection. Her words about forgiveness and second chances now felt like both blessing and burden. The corporate crisis team arrived with papers requiring immediate attention, their urgency feeling insignificant against the weight of personal revelation. David's empire was collapsing, but all he could focus on were the security videos playing on loop in his mind. Sarah, young and desperate, being turned away from his office while he sat unaware floors above. Sarah's last letter contained a final twist. She had invested her waitressing tips in Lawrence investment stock, believing that even if David didn't want their family, Ethan should still have a connection to his father's legacy. The small account had grown significantly, a testament to her unwavering faith in David's business acumen, even as she believed he had abandoned them. The hospital staff who had witnessed their journey brought more pieces of the puzzle. Some remembered Sarah from her treatment days, recalled her asking about David, remembered her hope that somehow the truth would emerge. Each recollection was another stone in the avalanche of what-ifs threatening to bury him. As surgery continued, David faced the ultimate test of his transformation. The empire he had sacrificed everything to build was falling apart, built on a foundation of manipulation and missed connections. The truth about the past offered both explanation and indictment, forcing him to confront the real cost of his former priorities. The weight of these revelations pressed against him as he waited for news about Ethan. His son's life hung in the balance while the carefully constructed narrative of the past decade unraveled. In the sterile hospital corridor, David Lawrence faced his moment of truth, understanding that sometimes the greatest crisis isn't in what we lose, but in discovering what was stolen from us by our own blind ambition. Be part of David and Ethan's touching journey. If their story moves your heart, hit that like button. Sometimes a single click can show how deeply a father's love resonates. The truth about Sarah's final years emerged like pieces of a heartbreaking puzzle. Through her detailed journals, medical records, and testimonies from those who had helped her, a story of extraordinary courage and sacrifice unfolded. Sarah's journey from successful non-profit worker to single mother fighting illness became clearer with each revelation. After leaving David's apartment that fateful night, Sarah had discovered her pregnancy while staying with a college friend in Boston. Her initial attempts to reach David were thwarted by his assistant's systematic interference. Each blocked call, each returned letter, reinforced her belief that David had chosen his career over their potential family. Despite her heartbreak, Sarah had made a conscious decision to protect their unborn child from what she perceived as rejection. She moved to Chicago, where she rebuilt her life from scratch. Working multiple jobs, waitressing during the day, bookkeeping at night, she managed to create a modest but loving home for Ethan. Her journals detailed Ethan's early years with painful beauty. First steps taken in a tiny apartment, first words spoken while she worked from home, first laugh that reminded her so much of David. She'd kept a dedicated record of every milestone, hoping that someday their son would understand the depth of love that surrounded his beginnings. The illness had started subtly. Fatigue she attributed to single motherhood, headaches blamed on stress. By the time doctors diagnosed the aggressive disease, Sarah was already focused on securing Ethan's future. She had researched David's success from afar, carefully documenting his achievements while protecting their son from the pain of perceived abandonment. Her decision to return to New York came only when her condition became terminal. Sarah had meticulously planned Ethan's journey to David, choosing the precise moment when she believed both father and son would be ready for each other. The photograph, the letter, the timing, everything had been orchestrated with a mother's careful consideration. The most haunting discoveries came from her hospital journals. Sarah had been receiving treatment at Mount Sinai, while David attended board meetings in the same building. Security footage showed multiple instances where they had nearly crossed paths, Sarah wheeling her IV stand through one corridor, while David strode through another, their timing off by mere minutes. Her final months were spent preparing Ethan for life without her, while simultaneously laying the groundwork for his future with David. She had created memory boxes, written letters for future birthdays, and recorded videos of herself sharing family stories and life advice. Each preparation was made with the hope that love would eventually bridge the gap she thought David had chosen to create. The true tragedy lay in the revelation that David's corporate machine, not David himself, had created their separation. Sarah's last diary entries showed her discovery of this truth, learned from a sympathetic nurse who recognized David from the news and revealed the systematic blocking of her attempts to contact him. By then, her illness had progressed too far for her to take action. Most heartbreaking were the unsent letters found in her personal effects. Each one addressed to David, each showing her unwavering love despite believing he had chosen success over family. She had documented their son's resemblance to his father, his determination, his smile, his way of furrowing his brow when concentrating. Even in her pain, she had made sure Ethan would know he carried the best of both his parents. The final letter, written days before her death, revealed her forgiveness and understanding. "I realize now that we were all victims of circumstance and ambition," she wrote. "The love I felt for you never died, it lives on in our son. Give him the chance we never had. Let him heal both your hearts." Sarah's story, finally unveiled in its entirety, transformed her from a memory into a profound presence in both David and Ethan's lives. Her courage in facing illness alone, her dedication to protecting their son, and her final act of ensuring father and son would find each other painted a portrait of extraordinary love and sacrifice. The hospital chapel, where Sarah had spent many hours during her treatment, became a place of connection for David. Sitting in the same pews where she had prayed for their son's future, he felt the weight of her presence and the depth of her forgiveness. Through her detailed records and careful planning, Sarah had given them one final gift, the truth that could set them all free. The revelation of Sarah's complete story sent shockwaves through everyone connected to the Lawrence Mitchell saga. David's former assistant, Jennifer Parker, now a VP at Goldman Sachs, faced public disgrace and professional ruin. Her tearful television confession, "I thought I was protecting the company's interests," sparked intense debate about corporate culture and personal ethics. The impact on Sarah's family was profound. Her parents, Tom and Mary Mitchell, struggled to reconcile their decade of anger toward David with the truth of corporate interference. Their grief, temporarily focused on blame, now shifted to the tragic waste of time and connection. The sight of Ethan in surgery, fighting for life just as their daughter had, brought a new dimension to their loss. The hospital staff who had cared for both Sarah and Ethan were deeply affected. Nurses who had witnessed Sarah's lonely battle now watched David's vigilant presence at his son's bedside with mixed emotions. Dr. Richardson, who had treated both mother and son, faced her own guilt about not making the connection sooner. Detective Martinez suspended her investigation, the weight of uncovered truths changing the nature of her search. The case transformed from a potential criminal matter into a tragic story of corporate overreach and missed connections. Her team's discoveries prompted internal reviews at several major companies about interference in employees' personal lives. The foster parents who had cared for Ethan struggled with their own revelations. Learning about Sarah's careful planning and David's unknowing absence challenged their assumptions about abandonment. Their media appearances shifted from accusatory to contemplative, adding another layer to the public discourse about family and privilege. Board members at Lawrence Investments faced personal and professional crises of conscience. Many had been present during Sarah's attempts to reach David. Some had even encountered her in the building. Their complicity in maintaining the corporate image now felt hollow against the human cost of their silence. Mrs. Reynolds, David's longtime housekeeper, carried her own burden of guilt. She had suspected something was amiss years ago but chose job security over speaking up. Now, as she helped maintain David's vigil at the hospital, each act of service felt like a small attempt at redemption. The media narrative underwent a dramatic shift. From Billionaire's mystery child to corporate culture's human toll, headlines reflected growing public outrage at how business priorities had destroyed a family. Social media exploded with similar stories of corporate interference in personal lives. Amanda Foster from Child Services found her professional perspective challenged. The case pushed boundaries of standard protocols, forcing her to reconsider traditional definitions of family stability and parental fitness. Her reports began reflecting a more nuanced understanding of wealth, privilege, and parental love. The hospital chaplain, who had kept Sarah's final letter safe for years, witnessed the impact of delayed truth. His quiet presence provided comfort as David grappled with what might have been, while his insights into Sarah's final days offered precious context for both father and son. Lawrence Investments employees faced their own moral reckonings. Many had been part of the system that prioritized corporate success over human connection. The revelations sparked internal discussions about company culture and personal responsibility, leading to anonymous confessions of similar incidents. The legal team that had handled Sarah's will discovered that multiple people had played parts in misfiling crucial documents. Each participant had believed they were protecting corporate interests, creating a chain of small decisions that resulted in years of unnecessary separation. Medical staff from Sarah's time at Mount Sinai came forward with memories, stories of her courage, her devotion to Ethan, and her quiet hope that truth would eventually prevail added layers to the family's narrative. Each recollection highlighted the human cost of corporate priority. The wider business community underwent its own soul-searching. Similar stories began emerging from other companies' personal lives sacrificed for professional gain, families separated by corporate machinery. Industry leaders faced pressure to examine their cultures and policies. Sarah's former colleagues from the non-profit sector provided another perspective. They shared stories of her determination to give Ethan a normal life, despite their circumstances, her refusal to use David's name for advantage, and her unwavering belief in the power of love to heal. The impact rippled through New York's social circles. People who had celebrated David's business success now questioned their own values. The story forced many to confront uncomfortable truths about privilege, power, and the price of ambition. In the hospital waiting room, these various threads of impact converged. David's vigil for Ethan became a focal point for larger discussions about corporate responsibility, family values, and the true meaning of success. Each person touched by the story found themselves re-evaluating their own choices and priorities. Meanwhile, Ethan's hospital room became a quiet center in the storm of revelations. While the world grappled with the implications of Sarah's story, father and son remained focused on their immediate battle of fight for life that transcended the complexity of their past and the chaos of their present. The consequences of Sarah's revealed story rippled through every aspect of David and Ethan's world. In the corporate realm, Lawrence Investments faced unprecedented scrutiny. Shareholders initiated a class action lawsuit against the company's former management, citing ethical breaches and corporate interference in personal matters. The stock price, already weakened by David's absence, plunged to historic lows. Jennifer Parker's confession triggered a domino effect of revelations. Other executives came forward with similar stories of protecting corporate interests at human cost. The SEC launched an investigation into corporate practices regarding employee privacy and personal affairs. The business world's moral compass faced a very public recalibration. David's personal wealth took a massive hit as investors fled and corporate raiders circled. The empire he'd built began crumbling, subsidiary by subsidiary. Carl Mitchell's hostile takeover gained momentum, with board members jumping ship daily. The financial press dubbed it the Lawrence legacy, how love toppled a titan. The legal consequences mounted rapidly. Employment lawyers filed suits on behalf of former employees whose personal lives had been similarly affected. Corporate governance experts called for industry-wide reforms. The Lawrence case became a cautionary tale in business ethics courses, examining the human cost of unchecked corporate power. Sarah's family pursued their own legal actions, not against David personally, but against the corporate system that had separated them. Their case sparked a national conversation about corporate responsibility and employee rights. Congressional hearings were scheduled to examine legislation protecting personal communications. The hospital faced its own consequences. An internal review revealed multiple instances where corporate policies had prevented personal information from reaching intended recipients. The resulting policy overhaul transformed how medical institutions handled patient communications nationwide. Media attention intensified to unprecedented levels. Documentary filmmakers competed for rights to the story. Book deals were offered. Hollywood producers circled. The human drama of love, loss, and redemption captured public imagination, though David refused all offers to commercialize their pain. The professional consequences for those involved were severe. Several board members resigned in disgrace. Corporate communications departments across the country underwent urgent reviews. HR policies regarding personal information were rewritten. The ripple effect touched every corner of corporate America. David's former social circle fractured. Some friends distanced themselves, fearing association with scandal. Others reached out with support, sharing their own stories of sacrifice for success. The Manhattan elite divided along moral lines, forcing many to confront their own choices. The foster care system underwent scrutiny for its role in keeping Ethan from his father. Investigations revealed systemic failures in connecting children with biological parents. Reform initiatives launched, using the Lawrence case as a catalyst for change. Within the hospital, where Ethan fought for life, the consequences manifested differently. Staff members who had known Sarah came forward with memories and regrets. The pediatric wing established new protocols for identifying family connections. A fellowship in Sarah's name was created for ethics in medical communication. Our financial consequences continued mounting. Legal fees, medical bills, and the cost of maintaining security against media intrusion strained even David's considerable resources. The man who once prioritized wealth above all found himself willing to spend his last dollar for his son's survival. Personal relationships transformed. Mrs. Reynolds, burdened by her years of silence, submitted her resignation, though David refused to accept it. The household staff, once kept at professional distance, became a close-knit support system for both father and son. The psychological impact ran deep. David underwent intensive therapy to process his guilt and grief. Child psychologists worked to prepare for Ethan's eventual understanding of his complex family history. The emotional consequences would require years of healing for all involved. Corporate culture itself faced a reckoning. Companies rushed to establish Lawrence rules protecting employee personal lives. Ethics consultants were in high demand. Business schools added case studies examining how prioritizing profit over people ultimately destroyed value. The consequences reached beyond immediate circles. Sarah's story inspired other single parents to come forward. Support groups formed. Foundations were established. Her struggle became a symbol for corporate humanity and parental devotion. Detective Martinez closed Sarah's case file with complicated emotions. The truth had been found, but justice felt incomplete. Her final report became required reading at police academies, examining how wealth and power could obscure simple human connections. Yet amid these cascading consequences, the most profound impact remained intensely personal. In Ethan's hospital room, surrounded by monitors and machines, David faced the ultimate consequence of past choices and present truths. The empire he'd built was crumbling, but his priorities had fundamentally shifted. As he maintained his vigil by his son's bedside, the consequences of business collapse seemed trivial compared to the precious second chance at fatherhood he refused to lose. As Ethan fought for life in the ICU, the final pieces of Sarah's story emerged with devastating clarity. A retired security guard from Lawrence Investments came forward with archived surveillance footage that changed everything. The tapes showed Sarah, heavily pregnant, making one last attempt to reach David the night before she disappeared. She had made it all the way to his office floor, only to be intercepted by not just his assistant, but a coordinated group of executives who had deemed her presence a threat to the company's IPO timing. More revelations followed. A former board member, dying of cancer, sent a notarized confession. There had been an actual corporate policy, never written but strictly enforced, to protect rising stars from personal complications. Sarah hadn't been the only victim. Dozens of lives had been altered by this invisible corporate machinery. The most shocking discovery came from Sarah's personal cloud storage, maintained all these years by her best friend. Hundreds of emails, all sent to David's personal address, had been systematically intercepted and deleted. Each message documented her pregnancy, her love, her hope for their family. The final email sent from her hospital bed contained an ultrasound image and 3 words, "He's your son." Sarah's journal entries painted a portrait of a woman who never stopped loving the father of her child, even while believing he had chosen success over family. She had followed David's career religiously, cutting out articles about his achievements, showing them to young Ethan with pride. "Your father builds things," she would tell their son. "Someday you'll build something even greater, bridges between hearts." The hospital's archives revealed another layer of tragic coincidence. Sarah had received treatment in the same building where David held board meetings. On multiple occasions they had been mere floors apart. But one security camera had captured a heart-wrenching near Miss Sarah in a wheelchair, weakened by treatment, passing through one door as David entered through another, neither aware of how close they were to reuniting. DNA tests, rushed due to Ethan's medical crisis, confirmed what Sarah had documented all along. The results showed something additional. Ethan had inherited the same rare blood type as David, a detail that would prove crucial in the hours to come. The genetic connection that corporate interference had tried to deny was written in their very cells. Letters from Sarah's hospice stay revealed her final discovery of the corporate conspiracy. A nurse, recognizing David from the news, had inadvertently mentioned seeing him in the building regularly. Sarah's last writings showed her struggle to process this information, her anger at the system that had kept them apart, and ultimately her decision to ensure Ethan would find his way back to his father. The complete picture showed a love story interrupted by corporate greed, a family torn apart by misguided loyalty to business interests, and a mother's extraordinary determination to protect her child while preserving the possibility of reunion. Sarah had orchestrated Ethan's journey to David not as a last resort, but as a final act of love for both father and son. Most poignantly, Sarah's preparation for Ethan's eventual reunion with David showed her deep understanding of both their characters. She had predicted David's transformation through fatherhood, writing in her final diary, "Success built his empire, but love will build his legacy. Our son will teach him what I always knew, that his heart was greater than his ambition." As these final pieces came together, David sat by Ethan's hospital bed, understanding at last the full scope of what had been stolen from them, and what Sarah had given back through her careful planning and unfailing love. The empire he had sacrificed everything to build had actually sacrificed everything that mattered, but Sarah's foresight and forgiveness had offered them all a chance at redemption. The truth hit David with the force of a physical blow as he sat in Ethan's ICU room, surrounded by beeping monitors and the weight of revelation. Every business decision, every ruthless move that had built his empire, now felt hollow against the reality of what corporate ambition had stolen from them. The cost of success wasn't measured in dollars, but in lost bedtime stories, missed first steps, and a decade of separation from his son. Sarah's detailed documentation forced him to confront his own complicity. While he hadn't actively chosen to abandon his family, his single-minded pursuit of success had created a system that made such abandonment possible. The corporate culture he'd fostered had valued profit over people, efficiency over humanity, and in doing so had destroyed what mattered most. The reality of Sarah's struggle struck him deeply. While he had been closing billion-dollar deals, she had been working double shifts to afford their son's medical care. His signature on corporate acquisitions had been mirrored by her signature on hospital payment plans. The contrast between their parallel lives was a harsh indictment of the values he'd once championed. Watching Ethan fight for life, David confronted the reality that his son had inherited not just his determination, but also Sarah's courage. The boy's journey to find him, orchestrated by Sarah's careful planning, showed a strength that no amount of corporate success could match. This was his true legacy, not the empire he'd built, but the family he'd nearly lost. The hospital room became a crucible of self-discovery. Each medical update forced David to confront the reality that some things couldn't be fixed with money or power. His son's survival hung on factors beyond his control, just as Sarah's fate had been sealed while he remained ignorant in his tower of success. The hardest reality to face was Sarah's forgiveness. Her journal showed no bitterness, only hope that father and son would eventually find each other. Her understanding of his potential for love, even while believing he had rejected them, was a testimony that broke him completely. She had seen his better self even when he had lost sight of it. As news of his empire's collapse filtered through his phone, David confronted the reality of his transformed priorities. The stock prices that once consumed his attention now seemed meaningless compared to Ethan's vital signs. His board's ultimatums carried no weight against his son's grip on his hand. The reality of what truly mattered had finally, irrevocably become clear. Through it all, Sarah's words in her final journal guided his transformation. Reality isn't in the empires we build, but in the love we choose to give. As he watched over their son, David finally understood the truth she had known all along, that his greatest success would not be measured in dollars, but in the depth of his love for their child. The reality of their story spread beyond hospital walls, forcing others to confront uncomfortable truths. Corporate leaders faced questions about the human cost of success. Families examined their own choices about priorities and presence. Sarah's journey became a mirror in which society saw its own values reflected. In Ethan's peaceful face, fighting for life with quiet determination, David saw the reality of his second chance. The empire might fall, the wealth might vanish, but the opportunity to be the father Sarah had always believed he could be, that was the only reality that mattered now. The transformation of David Lawrence unfolded in the stark fluorescent light of a hospital room, witnessed by nurses who had seen the full arc of his journey from corporate titan to devoted father. The man who once measured success in billions now counted victory in his son's steady heartbeat, each rise and fall of Ethan's chest more precious than any market gain. His physical transformation was striking. The perfectly tailored suits gave way to wrinkled hospital clothes, the commanding posture softened by hours of bedside vigils. His face, once stern for magazine covers, now showed every emotion openly. The staff, who had known him as the intimidating Mr. Lawrence, now saw simply Ethan's dad, his previous identity shed like an outgrown skin. The corporate raider who had dismantled companies without remorse now gently helped nurses change IV bags, learned medical terminology with the same intensity he once gave to market analysis, and spoke softly to his unconscious son about healing and hope. His legendary focus, once reserved for hostile takeovers, now centered entirely on Ethan's recovery. His transformation extended beyond the personal. When news broke of Lawrence Investments' imminent collapse, David's only response was to ensure his remaining assets were transferred to a trust for children's medical research. The business world watched in amazement as the Wolf of Wall Street voluntarily surrendered his empire to secure his son's future. Even his voice changed. associates noted. The sharp tone that had dominated boardrooms softened when speaking to Ethan's doctors. His famous eloquence, once used to close billion-dollar deals, now expressed itself in reading children's stories and singing lullabies remembered from his own childhood. The transformation affected everyone around him. Mrs. Reynolds witnessed her employer evolve from demanding perfectionist to patient father. Security staff saw their strict protocols adapt to accommodate get-well cards from other young patients. Even Detective Martinez noted how the guarded businessman had transformed into someone authentically vulnerable. Sarah's influence guided this metamorphosis. Her journals provided a roadmap for the father she had always believed David could become. Each entry showed her faith in his capacity for love, her certainty that their son would eventually unlock the heart beneath the corporate armor. The media documented this transformation with fascination. Photos captured the startling contrast: the old David Lawrence signing mergers in mahogany boardrooms versus the new father learning to change medical dressings with trembling hands. Each image told a story of priorities transformed through love. His relationship with wealth transformed most dramatically. The man who had once moved markets now focused on moving medical equipment to make Ethan more comfortable. His phone, once constantly buzzing with market updates, now held only medical alerts and photos of his son's progress. In quiet moments between medical rounds, David reflected on his transformation through Sarah's eyes. She had seen this potential in him long ago: the capacity to love beyond ambition, to find purpose beyond profit. Her final letter spoke directly to this change. "You were always meant to be extraordinary in love, not just in business." Hospital staff marked his transformation through small gestures: his growing ability to comfort other worried parents, his patient explanations of complex procedures to younger patients, his quiet support of families facing similar battles. The corporate shark had become a source of gentle strength. Perhaps most profound was the internal transformation. David's understanding of success underwent a complete revolution. The metrics that had once defined his life, stock prices, market share, corporate rankings, fell away against new measurements: Ethan's smile, a moment of consciousness, a squeeze of his hand. This transformation, born in crisis and nurtured by love, became permanent. As Ethan fought for life, David Lawrence completed his metamorphosis from business titan to father, guided by Sarah's wisdom and their son's unwavering need for his transformed heart. The resolution began with Ethan's first conscious breath after surgery. Dr. Richardson's tired smile told David everything before she spoke. "He's going to make it." The wave of relief that swept through the hospital floor marked the end of one journey and the beginning of another. And their story, which had captured national attention, was entering a new chapter. Legal resolutions followed swiftly. David surrendered control of Lawrence investments without a fight. His priorities irreversibly shifted. The corporate empire he'd built was divided, sold, transformed, but he found himself utterly at peace with its dissolution. The board's attempts to force him out became redundant. He had already chosen a different path. Sarah's family reached their own resolution. Watching David's transformation and dedication to Ethan during the crisis, they found the forgiveness that Sarah had discovered in her final days. Together, they established the Sarah Mitchell Foundation, dedicated to supporting single parents facing medical crises and preventing corporate interference in family matters. The investigation into corporate practices reached its conclusion. Several executives faced criminal charges for their role in suppressing personal communications. New legislation, dubbed the Sarah Mitchell Act, was proposed to protect employees' personal lives from corporate interference. David testified in support, his story adding powerful weight to the reforms. A resolution came for the staff who had witnessed their journey. The hospital implemented new protocols for identifying and connecting family members, ensuring no other parent and child would miss each other in its halls. The pediatric wing, renamed the Sarah Mitchell Children's Center, became a model for compassionate family-centered care. The media circus gradually dispersed as the story shifted from scandal to redemption. Final interviews captured David and Ethan's strengthening bond, Sarah's legacy of love, and the transformation of a corporate titan into a devoted father. The headlines changed from accusation to inspiration. Professional consequences settled into place. Jennifer Parker, the former assistant who had intercepted Sarah's messages, faced justice but also found redemption through her work with the foundation. The corporate culture she had served underwent systematic reform, with David's story serving as a cautionary tale in business schools nationwide. Financial resolution surprised everyone. While David's corporate empire crumbled, the small investment account Sarah had maintained for Ethan, built from her waitressing tips invested in Lawrence investment stock, had grown substantial enough to secure their son's future. Her final gift to them both was freedom from financial worry. The foster parents found their resolution through understanding. Initially hostile, they came to recognize the larger story of love and loss that had shaped Ethan's journey. Their relationship transformed from adversaries to extended family, providing Ethan with an even wider circle of love. Detective Martinez closed the case file with satisfaction, all questions finally answered. Sarah's disappearance was no longer a mystery but a testament to a mother's love and sacrifice. The truth had brought not just closure but transformation for all involved. Most importantly, Ethan found his resolution. As he recovered, surrounded by both his father's love and his mother's legacy, he began to understand his own story. The boy who had once felt abandoned now knew he had always been loved by both parents in ways that transcended presence and absence. And David's personal resolution manifested in his new life focus. He established a home-based consulting practice that allowed him to prioritize Ethan while using his business expertise to help family-owned companies thrive without sacrificing personal relationships. His transformation from corporate raider to compassionate advisor completed the circle of change. The hospital room that had witnessed their crisis became a place of healing and new beginnings. As Ethan grew stronger, father and son began planning their future, one built not on corporate success, but on the foundation of family love that Sarah had always envisioned for them. Through it all, Sarah's journals provided their compass, her wisdom guiding their path forward. The resolution she had hoped for, planned for, and believed in had finally come to pass. Her story, once hidden behind corporate walls, now served as inspiration for others facing similar choices between success and love. The morning Ethan was discharged from the hospital marked their true new beginning. David and his son walked out together, not to the mansion but to a brownstone in Chelsea, a home chosen for its proximity to parks, schools, and most importantly, free from the shadows of corporate success. The moving trucks carried not priceless art but Ethan's drawings, not antiques but comfortable furniture meant for family life. Their daily routine established itself naturally. Mornings began with shared breakfast and homework checks, David learning to be both father and teacher. The home office transformed into a shared space where Ethan could do his schoolwork while David managed their foundation's activities. Every decision, from meal planning to weekend activities, centered around their growing bond. The Sarah Mitchell Foundation flourished under their joint care. Ethan, despite his young age, took pride in helping select families for assistance. His own experience made him particularly empathetic to children facing medical challenges. David watched in awe as his son displayed the same compassionate spirit that had drawn him to Sarah years ago. Their new social circle formed organically around shared values rather than wealth. Other parents from Ethan's school, families from the foundation, and medical staff who had become friends created a support network based on genuine connections. The superficial relationships of David's corporate past fell away, replaced by authentic friendships. Professional life took an unexpected turn. David found fulfillment in mentoring small business owners, teaching them to build success without sacrificing family. His experiences became powerful lessons, his transformation from corporate titan to conscious advisor inspiring others to re-examine their priorities. But the brownstone's garden became their sanctuary. Together, They planted Sarah's favorite flowers, creating a living memorial that bloomed with the seasons. Ethan learned about his mother through these tangible connections, while David found healing in continuing her love of nurturing growing things. Family dynamics expanded in surprising ways. Sarah's parents became regular visitors, sharing stories and building the extended family connection she had always wanted for Ethan. The foster parents contributed their own chapter to Ethan's story, enriching his life with additional love and understanding. Their home filled with evidence of new beginnings, science projects sprawling across the kitchen table, musical instruments waiting for lessons, sports equipment ready for weekend games. Each item represented a normal childhood experience David had almost missed, now cherished with profound gratitude. The Foundation's office, located in Sarah's old non-profit building, became a symbol of their merged legacies. Photos of Sarah hung alongside pictures of families they'd helped, her spirit of giving continuing through their work. Ethan spent afternoons there after school, homework spread across the same desk where his mother had once planned community programs. Most significantly, their relationship deepened through shared healing. Regular therapy sessions helped them process their complex history, while quiet evening talks allowed them to express fears, hopes, and growing understanding. The bond that Sarah had believed in blossomed fully, strengthened by their journey through crisis. Through it all, they kept Sarah's memory alive in daily life. Her journals became bedtime reading, her favorite songs played during dinner preparation, her values evident in their choices and actions. She remained a living presence in their home, guiding their new beginning with her documented wisdom and love. The transformation of their lives reflected in small details: David learning to cook Ethan's favorite meals, weekend adventures exploring the city as tourists, impromptu living room dance parties. The man who once measured success in billion-dollar deals now counted it in his son's laughter and growing confidence. Their new beginning wasn't just about leaving the past behind, but about building a future that honored Sarah's vision while creating their own path forward. Each day brought fresh opportunities to choose love over ambition, presence over power, and family over fortune, choices that felt increasingly natural as their new life took root. The final revelation came on Ethan's 8th birthday. As they sorted through Sarah's remaining possessions, now moved to their new home, they discovered a hidden compartment in her old jewelry box. Inside lay a sealed envelope, marked to be opened when you're both ready. The letter inside changed everything once again. Sarah had known she was ill before leaving David that night 10 years ago. Her initial doctor's visit, scheduled to confirm her pregnancy, had revealed the first signs of her condition. She had attempted to reach David not just to share news of their child, but to face her health challenges together. The corporate interference that blocked her wasn't just about protecting business interests, it had altered the course of multiple lives. The letter contained a USB drive with video recordings Sarah had made throughout her pregnancy and Ethan's early years. Each clip showed her speaking directly to David, sharing their son's milestones, her hopes for their future, and most surprisingly, her unwavering belief that love would eventually bring them all full circle. Most powerful was her final recording, made days before her death. "David," she said, her face thin but her eyes bright, "if you're watching this, then our son has found his way home. Remember that time is precious, but it's never too late for love to heal what ambition broke. Take care of our boy. And let him teach you what I always knew, that your heart was your greatest asset, not your business empire." The revelation transformed their healing process. David's guilt over missing Sarah's illness was tempered by understanding her choice to face it on her terms. Ethan discovered his mother's incredible strength and foresight. Together they found closure in Sarah's final gift, the truth that completed their story. Their response to this revelation became their greatest tribute to Sarah. The foundation expanded its mission to include early cancer detection for single parents. Ethan, inspired by both his parents' journeys, developed a passionate interest in medicine. David found peace in knowing that Sarah had forgiven him long before he learned to forgive himself. The media made one final attempt to sensationalize their story, but David and Ethan chose to share it on their own terms. Through the Foundation's work, they transformed their personal tragedy into hope for others. Sarah's courage and vision continued to change lives, her legacy growing beyond anything she might have imagined. The final piece of closure came when they scattered Sarah's ashes in the garden of their new home, under a cherry tree like the one where she and David had first met. Ethan released a handful of petals into the wind, whispering, "Thank you, Mom, for believing in Dad when he didn't believe in himself." As father and son stood together under the blooming tree, David finally understood the full circle of their journey. Sarah hadn't just given him a son, she had given him a second chance at becoming the man she had always seen beneath his ambition. Through Ethan, through her careful planning, through her endless love, she had orchestrated the greatest transformation of all. The corporate empire was gone, but in its place stood something far more valuable, a family built on love, truth, and forgiveness. Sarah's final revelation hadn't just brought closure to their past, it had opened the door to a future she had envisioned long ago, when she first fell in love with the man behind the ambition. Ethan looked up at his father, his eyes reflecting Sarah's wisdom and love. "Dad," he said, "I think Mom would be proud of us now." David pulled his son close, knowing that in this moment, in this garden with Sarah's love surrounding them, they had finally found their true fortune. Has this story of love, redemption, and second chances touched your heart? Show your support by subscribing to our channel and joining our storytelling family. Every like, share, and comment helps us continue bringing these moving stories to life. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that love can overcome any obstacle. Your emotions and thoughts matter. Let us know in the comments how David and Ethan's journey resonated with you. Curious about what happens next? Should we explore their new life together in part 2? Drop a heart in the comments if you want to follow their continuing story of healing and growth. Together, let's celebrate the power of unconditional love.